All right, high rollers, we've had this gentleman on a few times before. It's always a treat. WSOP bracelet winner in 1993, 7-card stud. He's had numerous cashes in the main event. Final tabled the main in 1994, the year of Russ Hamilton. He came sixth. And he's the guy who introduced us all to Omaha. Back in the day, they called it Nugget Hold'em. Robert Turner, the chip burner. Thanks for joining us, man. Nice to have you back.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thank you for calling. Happy holidays to everybody.
Absolutely. Are you ready for Christmas? Have you got everything set? Any poker gifts on your wish list?
No, a few poker parties. That's about it.
Now, you've told us the story before. You introduced the game of Omaha to Poker Hall of Famer Bill Boyd back in the day, who then offered it to his players at the Golden Nugget, and everyone seemed to like it right from the get-go. Is that correct?
Right. It really took off. He started off, I think, a 2-4 game called Nugget Hold'em. And then they raised the limit to 4-8. Then they closed the poker room and moved it across the street to the Horseshoe. And it stayed there 4-8 Omaha, I think high only for quite a while until it moved out to Boulder Station. And now I understand that the Orleans is taking a little bit of that business away. They've started an Omaha high at the Orleans. So it's basically that same game has never broke up. If you think about it, it's been continuous for a lot of years.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. You think about one poker game.
Well, listen, I got to give you personal thanks because about 2 years ago, when I realized I couldn't beat the 10-cent, 25-cent Hold'em games online, I started playing Omaha High-Low. And I seem to love that variant. I mean, I consider myself a tight player, and the style seems to work for me in Omaha High-Low. I've done quite well in that game.
Well, it's two, three things. As poker, always, the best player will always get the money. So a lot of people say, well, it's a lot of luck. And now I introduced 5-card Omaha in California, and I started at Hollywood Park. The biggest splash was the Normandy. We had it up to, if you can imagine, the Normandy Casino. It's now Lady Luck. Larry Flint changed the name and bought it. But about 18 months ago, we had as high as 7 and 8 games of Big O Omaha using 5-card. And people just love it. And another major casino, Hawaii Gardens, is now the Garden Casino, just changed all of their Omaha over to 5-card.
Why do you think that is, the 5-card? I mean, you add that extra card, and now everyone's got the nuts.
Yeah, it's like Omaha on crack. It doesn't. It changes a little bit different game, of course, but you have to remember this: the more chances you give action players a chance to gamble, the better game you have. So the principle is still the same. If you give an action player 4 cards in Omaha, they'll rarely throw a hand away. But if you give them 5 cards, we laugh all the time. We watch people play every single hand for 20 hours.
It's always pot.
Well, yeah, that's in the pot limit. We have that also, but we're spreading 3-6 Omaha. So you can imagine the action with 5 cards and 3-6 Omaha. 6-12 kill. So pots are $200 or $300 almost every single hand at Hollywood Park, and at the Garden Casino they're playing at 12 and 24 and 4 and 8, and we have 6 and 12 Omaha 5-card. 5-card's really taken off in LA now.
Is that Big O? Is that what that is?
Yeah, Big O, right.
So let me ask you this. You said off the top that the money always goes to the skilled players. Now, I've talked to people who sit down at a limit game, like you mentioned, 3-6, and you've got 8 people seeing the flop and 6 people seeing the turn, and a lot of people refer to it as, oh, I just lost at bingo. So how does the skill player rise from that kind of game when everyone's seeing the next card?
It's pretty simple. You just play less hands. Those hands that look real good to you, for example, I analyze players in our game, and we've got a few people that are trying to play the nuts. And the difference in trying to play the nuts is, I'll give an example. They may have ace deuce. It's not an automatic play for them. You understand where it might be for you and I? It's not for them. And they gear it down to, you got 5 cards, so they'll gear it down to 2 aces and 2 babies. And, in other words, they gear it down to the absolute pure nuts. Now what happens is, they don't win a lot of money, but they never lose any money. In other words, a real bad day, after a 10-hour session, they might, let's say it's a 6-12 game, they might be stuck $80. And we make a joke. We say, well, do you want us to do an investigation of how that happened? How did you lose? But they might play 1 hand an hour, 2 hands an hour. And keep in mind, and here's another thing to remember: they're always getting 6-1 or 7-1 on their money. It's like taking odds on a crap table. So every time they play a hand, people don't realize, this guy hadn't been in the pot in 45 minutes. Now he's in the pot, and it's 7-way action, and there's a low possibility. And if he's betting or raising, he not only has the low with a backup, he has a nut high draw too. So over an 8-hour period, the best players would just get the money. Now it's hard to gear it down to that level. It's hard. And in other hands, if they pick up all paints, double suited or something, it's getting 7-1 on their money. A lot of times they'll win a pot in 6-12. They'll win a pot that's 400 or 500. They don't have to win one or two a day, and they're way ahead of the game. They don't have any big wins. In other words, when I play the game, I'm allowed to have swings of down 400, up 400. And you look at their stack, they always say, let's say they buy it for 400. They always got that 400 in front of them, or after 7-8 hours, it's 600. And if you're having a real bad day, they got 340 in front of them, or 350. Their swings are not great at all.
I'll tell you, I think that's one of the issues that I suffer from in poker is I play very tight. The big swings don't appeal to me. Sometimes I make big folds, and I wonder if I should be loosening up a bit. I made a fold at the World Series of Poker this year that still haunts me in the Omaha high-low. I made day 2, but it was late day 1. I was facing off against a bracelet winner. I think that might have intimidated me. But I had ace-3 on a flop of queen 4-5. And I was the initial raiser. I bet maybe half the pot or slightly less than half the pot. And John Redding came over the top for all my chips. And I thought, and I ended up laying it down. He busted before me. I finished 113th. They paid 110, and I've been kicking myself ever since because I told myself, when you face off against these guys that you think are good, sometimes you got to gamble. And I decided in that situation to preserve my tournament life.
What was the flop again?
Sorry, I had
4-5, queen 4-5.
It was queen 4-5, and I had pocket aces with a 3. Now I knew he had ace deuce. I just knew he had ace deuce.
I would have gambled right there. I would have just went with it. Yeah.
Yeah, see, it's been bugging me ever since, and that's it. Sometimes you got to get those chips in the middle to win those big pots, right?
Yeah, we've all made that, and sometimes it's just that one decision that's the whole tournament life,
It was in my mind. That was the key hand, and that was I should have just got it in there, and I've been kicking myself.
Yeah, that's the way tournament poker is. It just comes down to sometimes you have to. It's so bad you have to get up and walk away. And say, that was it. That was the hand. If I win that hand, I've got 30, 40,000 or 50,000, and it's over. I'm going to coast on into the money, easy. And and I think that's the problem with most tournament. On the bubble, when you're 3 out of the bubble or 4 out of the bubble, you have two choices. You think, do I get involved and play this big hand, or just wait and make the money? I've tried it both ways. I'm not sure which is proper, but.
By the way, he told me what he had.
Let me tell you.
He had ace, queen, deuce.
I was going to say probably had ace, queen.
Yeah, ace, queen, deuce.
Yeah, we're with a low ace, queen, deuce. So, I like your hand.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know what was going to come, but
I don't know what I was thinking. Anyway, listen, Robert, I love
if he's got 3 queens, you're still okay. He may not have everything. He'd have to have perfect.
Right.
That's the only way you're dead in that hand. He has to have perfect 3 queens and an ace deuce or something, but it's hard to put somebody on perfect.
Yeah, I got a few looks at the table too, like how could you fold that? But anyway, I got to thank you because I do love Omaha high-low. It's the only game I play now. I don't dare play Omaha or Big O. Haven't figured that out. I'm sure I'll get to that one day, but I really like Omaha high-low. Now, regular Omaha, the Big O, we had Lyman on from Live at the Bike. He's a big Omaha player. He says the game is all about draws, that there's a different hand to play on every single street. So it becomes a psychological contest with every turn of the card. How have you seen the game of Omaha, whether it's high-low or just regular Omaha, change in terms of style of play since you introduced it back in the day?
Yeah, I don't think it's changed at all. I don't see any changes. The players are better. They're better informed, of course. But the principle's always been the same. You want some kind of a hand already made. I don't care if it's top pair. You want some kind of hand, and you want big draws, and that's when they gamble. In other words, if they've got, there comes a king and they got a king, now they got an open-end straight and a king. In other words, they're not going to lose to 2 deuces. You got to beat the top pair and the nut draw. They're putting all the money in, and a lot of times they don't gamble as much with one to come as they do on that flop. And so you have to be careful. You know, if it's pot limit, you don't want to shut yourself out to where you've got to put it all in. You'd rather see one more card off so you can make a decision. So that's probably the difference between the pros and the amateurs. They try to get all the money in on that flop, so they bust you. You know, they've got more combinations. They've got some kind of a hand too. They got a two pair or top. You know, that they might have king jack 10 queen. They flop king jack, so they got open end and two pair, and they really don't put the test on you.
One of the things I've noticed is you need that redraw too. I mean, a lot of times the money goes in on the turn.
They always have the redraw. They always have some kind of a hand. It can be just tens or jacks, or they're not dead on that part of it, but they have a draw, a big draw, and it's at the nuts, and they're going to make you gamble. They're going to put you to the test. It's hard to bluff into those hands, because they're going to come right back over the top of you.
Well, I'll tell you what. I was lucky enough many years ago when I was first getting into poker to win an online tournament. I got to go to Barcelona for 10 days, and I was at the Grand Casino there, and all the big name players were there. It was the World Heads Up Championship, and I walked over to the cash area, and they were all playing Omaha. And I just couldn't believe the money going in the pot. And this one guy won a pot with naked aces, and he took ribbing after he was scooping the pot. But I mean, all the money went in pre, and they were saying, that's all you had was aces? I mean, it can get lively, can't it?
But before the flop, believe it or not, with aces, they play it almost the same as hold'em. That's what I told you. They've got some kind of a hand to start with, but he probably had something with the aces. He probably had a double suited or a small wheel draw with it. But yeah, they play it just about the same. You can't hardly get anybody to slow play them in Omaha to start. Before the flop. Now, the flop is not worth anything. Two aces on the flop is hardly worth zero. Unless now you're just playing the redraws, but it's nice to have a pair. The principles have been about the same. But the best player, like I said, the best player will always get the money. And then another thing, the people that are playing the nuts, the very, very solid nuts, if you analyze their play over 8 hours, there's not much fluctuation. And they're not real big winners, but they're winners. That's where people like me, I'm allowed to bust the whole table in 2 hours, or something. I have a nickname to live up to, and it's the chip burner. My problem is in tournaments, and it's been that problem all my life, is putting the brakes on. I don't have any problem getting all the chips, but when the limits get real high in a tournament, and like you said, we're 4 or 5 out of the bubble, it's hard. I think it's hardest with everybody. It's just hard to just put the brake on and just coast on in. You have so much confidence. You get so much confidence right there. You think, I'm dominating. There's no way they can beat me. And then you take 2 bad beats, and you can't. You're in for your life now.
Well, I haven't played Hold'em in a while, and I went down to Caesars Windsor last weekend, and there was a guy. It was a 1-3 game. You can max buy-in for $300. This guy had $2,300 on the table. He was winning every hand. He was bullying. I was the only other player at the table that was winning. And this hand came up. I had pocket queens. I popped it up to 25. I got 2 callers. I was on the button. The flop comes out Jack 3-7. I got pocket queens. The guy in the small blind goes all in for 75. Okay, so he matches the pot. The other guy with 2,300, he calls the 75. And I get thinking, I go, I said, I got this guy. I said, but this guy's so hot. And I've always been told you don't mess with a guy on a rush. Anyway, I thought about it. I ended up folding. I folded, okay? They turn over the cards. Of course, the guy with 2,300's got ace jack. And I was like, man, I made a bad fold. Boom, the very next card was an ace. I mean, isn't poker funny that way? I made a bad fold, and yet it helped me in the long run.
Yeah, when people have a rush like that, it's hard to overcome it. Just to give an example, I've been playing poker. It's hard to say this, but over 50 years, and that's a long time. And I've only had one rush of cards in that. And I play every day of my life. I've only had one rush of cards in the whole career of 50-something years of poker. I've had a couple of tournament rushes where I remember one time in a no limit, I never lost a hand from wire to wire. I played for 12 hours, and so I probably played 35 hands, and I won all 35. I mean that's okay, but I'm talking about a rush in a live game where every single flop was just an amazing type of flop. If you had ace queen, you called a couple of raises, and it come ace queen deuce. If you had 10 jack, it come ace, king, queen. Then this went on. This went on for. I took $200 and went 30,000.
Wow.
And I was young. It was the golden nugget. But not only did I win the 30,000, I was playing against Doyle and Bill Boyd and Sailor Roberts. It was an all-star lineup. And back then, I was the kid.
Man, that must have felt good.
Listen, back then I never had that many chips, and I had rat-holed about 5,000 because I never had that much money in front of me. And I remember when I quit the game and I went to bed, I was up 23,000, I think it was something like that. I couldn't sleep. I was in Vegas and I took a cab and went and bought a diamond ring, and I'm just wondering, what am I going to do with this much cash? I took $200 and this money just fell on me. And I went back to the table, and it continued on for about another 3 hours, and I finally just quit. And I've never seen anything like it in my life. I never forget, I went back, Bill Boyd came to the table, and he bought in a rack of 10,000, and I picked up ace 10. He raised it, and I'm thinking, this is not a good hand. But I've been running so good. I hit every flop, And I called like 150, 200, whatever it was for the flop. And Bill Boyd's got 2 jacks. He had not even sat in his chair. He got a cup of coffee, he put the racks down, he raised it, and he's sitting down, and here comes the flop, 10, 10 deuce. And that's just the way it was, and he let out like 600, and I raised him all in 3,200. He just threw his hand away, he put his hand in his coffee. His hot cup of coffee. He was so mad. It was, it's like, what do you got to do to beat this guy? He has every single hand. But it's only happened once in my whole life. But it was a time to remember.
Well, absolutely. Well, let me ask you: do you think enough players keep an opponent's rush in mind when they're playing poker? In other words, should they be avoiding the person on a rush?
Of course, absolutely.
But I made a bad fold. I made a bad fold with those queens, and some of the math guys would say over time you'll get them. I made a bad fold there, but it turned out to be good because he hit it.
Yeah, remember this. It's not necessarily the player as it is the seat. In other words, when a person is that hot, it has nothing to do with the player. That's the seat that's going to win all the money. And I'll give you a perfect example. I used to manage the props. The bicycle, we had a 30-80 or a 40-80 game, and I had about 12 props, house players. I guess you would refer to that word for me. And I would have 6 or 7 of them come in to start the game every morning at 10 o'clock. And as live customers come in, the house players would get up. And these house players at the time on scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, they were all 10s, maybe 9s and 10s, but all perfect limit holder players. And there was wasn't hardly any difference between every single one of them. And they would just say to themselves, well, who's going to get the lucky seat today? Because one seat every day would win $1,000 or $1,500. And everybody else would either break even or lose. And so they play them to get, remember, they coming in at the same time, playing with each other every single day. So it was the seat, had nothing to do so much with the player. Anybody can play pocket kings, pocket queens, or whatever, in limited poker. And so a lot of times you just get the lucky seat. If the guy that's on a rush, this happens all the time, the guy that's on a rush quits the game, change seats, take his seat, because it's just going to continue.
That's interesting because, I never really bought into that. When I'm sitting at a poker table, you hear a lot of players say, oh, he's got the hot seat, and sure enough, he gets up and leaves probably several hours too early if he's running hot, right? Probably leaves too soon. Someone else jumps in that seat because it's the hot seat. I never really bought into that, but you're telling me that you think it actually happens that way.
For sure. For sure. Matter of fact, sometimes I went back to the table to see how much money I left on the table. You had a good run. Let's say you bought into 200 or 300 and you make 1,000 and you quit because you're happy. That's a good win. And you come back 2 hours later and the guy has 4 times that much in that seat. The cards just kept coming. It had nothing to do with the player.
That brings up an interesting topic, when to leave a poker game, whether you're winning or losing. Let's talk about when you're winning. I guess the legends of the game, all the top players, they realize that when they're running good, when they're playing well, when they're in the zone, that's the time to put sleep aside and stay and play, correct?
There's two thoughts to that, and they're both correct. Now, here's an example. If you're grinding, let's say your goal that day is to win 400, and you're up 6, and everything you've done so far has been perfect. But now you take a beat. Now, I don't mean take a beat like you get two jacks beat with two queens. Here's what I call a beat. You've got nut diamond draw. You got a nut flush draw, and you miss it. Now, you didn't lose much money on the hand. You follow me? But you've made 7 flushes before this one. This time you even got a bigger flush. You got ace king of diamonds and 2 diamonds on the board, and you don't even call on the end because you missed your flush. And the guy's already bet, or maybe you bet and a raise, and you throw your hand away because you got nothing. But you had the nut flush and 2 overcards.
So you might have lost $50.
$50, but your rush is over. You're dead. You understand? You can't say, "Oh, I've been running real good, and look at that big hand." No, the cards have sent you a signal. It's over for you. Time to get up. And what I'm saying, you didn't take a bad beat. You just missed the flush. But because you had made 6 of them in a row, or 6 hands or 7 hands in the 2 or 3 hours you played, every straight draw you made, every set you filled up, and now you had you had one of your biggest hands of the day, and you missed it. You haven't lost much for the hand, but it's like God sent you a signal, and you got what you wanted. You wanted 400. You got 500 or 600 in front of you. Don't be greedy. Now let's go to the other side, what you talked about. I used to know a guy that would try to win your life, and he played exactly what you're talking about. Let's say he got lucky and won a few hands, drew out on a couple, but now he's got a lot of chips in front of him, and he's a solid player. Well, he would stop gambling. He would stay to the game broke, but he would just quit gambling because he knew everybody was gunning for him, and he tightened his game so down because he's got all the chips. Especially it's like I like to use this as a limit player because no limit players, they come in and out of the seat so much, but limit usually they stay there and it's a long session. But where he was playing 7-8 of hearts with 4-5 way action or pocket sixes, he stops all that. Now he's got your money. He's only going to show you aces or kings. Does that make sense?
Right.
And he's going to play for 8 more hours or 9 more hours. You're not going to win the money back. You're going to lose your life if you're not careful.
You described me right there. That's how I play. I get the chips and I tighten up and I wait for it.
Yeah, just wait for it.
Right.
And that's a sign of a real good pro. If you can make that happen. And the other side of the coin, you mentioned a good point. You asked me, you made a statement, knowing when to quit, like the song, when to hold and when to fold. That's the hardest thing in poker. There's nothing harder in poker.
I always wonder about that because I don't think it's talked about enough. And I play quite a bit of poker online and live in the cash games. And this is what happens to me. I'm sitting there, I'm having fun. This is what I came out to do. This is what I want to do. And at some point, I get the thought in my head that the fun stopped, or I'm tired now, or I'm just not into it anymore. I start drifting off to the TV. That's when I should quit. I invariably play another round or two. And that's dangerous. I mean, you got to know when to get up and leave.
Yeah, you've got to put a stop loss on your money. And yesterday was a perfect example. I host a game for Hollywood Park Casino. I'm the Omaha host of all the Omaha pot limit and everything. But yesterday I sat down in a 3-6 with a 6-12 kill Omaha. I started the game about 10 in the morning. At 11:30, I bought it for 40. I was up 200. Now, that's a lot in a 3-6 game. I'd want 2 hands. But still, I've got 2 racks. But I usually stay 7 hours or 6 hours, and this is in the first hour. But I don't have to play. I can get up and do whatever I want to. I'm the host. But when the day was over, I lost $20. Now, you hate yourself for saying, what's wrong with 200 when all you're trying to win? Actually, in my position, I'm just trying to break even because I work for the casino. But 200, what's wrong with 200? 200 at the table is nothing. 200 when you're driving home, let it buy something. You want to go shopping. It's not. It's real money. When you leave the table, it's real money in your pocket.
It really is a big decision, isn't it? You don't think about it a lot, though, but when to leave the table is a critical part of poker indeed.
Yeah, you think how much groceries 200? You go to the grocery store, that's a lot of groceries you can buy. 200 at a grid at Walmart or somewhere is a lot of groceries or a lot of whatever you want to buy.
Let me ask you this then: do you think the Daniel Negreanos, the Phil Ivies are better at that part of poker than most people? I mean, they just have an inherent ability to leave when it's right.
No, those are two different poker players. Phil Ivey is a grinder and will try to win your life. Daniel Negreanos playing for fun. He's got a big sponsorship and he's got a lot of money. He's not going to play long. So he's after just one hand or two quit. He makes his money from the sponsorships and from the tournaments and stuff like that. he's not your poker player that's going to come in and play 2 days or 3 days. Phil Ivey allowed to play 3 days, and trying to play higher, and very dangerous player. Daniel Lugano is not dangerous at all.
If you were to style yourself as a perfect poker player, okay, what would you be? Would you be one of these aggressive types that always want to be the table captain? How would you mold yourself as a poker player if you could start from scratch again and try to be the best player in the world?
I think I would be aggressive, but both sides win. I don't know if you know, Dan Harrington wrote his first book he wrote on poker. He said the 3 people that created the aggressive style of poker were Stu Unger, Jack Keller, and Robert Turner. So he put me pretty good.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, if you look at Dan Harrington's his first book on Hold'em, I think it's a yellow cover. I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, he said who started the aggressive style of poker? Yeah, I'm pretty flattered to be there with Jack Keller and.
Well, that's some legendary company right there.
Yeah, and I like Stewie. I never had any problem with Stewie. I tortured Stewie. As long, I made Stu Unger in gin rummy tournaments. I made him turn the table over to us. He actually physically turned a table over, a banquet table at the Aladdin. I think it was the Landmark Hotel in a gin rummy tournament.
Wow.
He knocked on me in a tournament. He said, if you catch me, I'd already caught him like 5 times. And he said, if you knock me again, I turn the table over. I caught him again. He just turned the table over and ran out of the room.
Now, gin rummy, they say he was perhaps the best ever. What do you think?
He was a very good gin rummy tournament player. But no, not even close. I'd rather not go into that part of it.
Sure.
They might write in a book, but no. There's a lot of great gin rummy tournament players. You have to get lucky to beat them. I mean, I remember one time I came in second in a world tournament at Tropicana, I think it was. A guy I beat, he played so much better than I did. It wasn't even funny. And his feelings were hurt. He was in the bar. He was drinking. And I'll never forget, I walked by and he said, why don't you and I go up to the room and play some gin rummy? And I think his name was Art. He smoked a huge cigar. I'll never forget it. I said to him, that's what I said to him. I said, why don't you and I go find somebody we can beat? I couldn't beat him in other words, he would grind me into the carpet. I mean, this guy lived gin. He played gin 12, 15, like we play poker, he played gin 10 or 15 hours a day every day of his life. He was an expert. I can't even tell you how good he could play gin. And I got lucky on him. I beat him, but I knew it was luck.
Well, listen, then I'll leave you with this. I run into guys like you. You say you're aggressive. You've been included in some legendary company as one of the aggressive players of all time. If I sit down in the cash game against a guy like you, should I be aiming for your left, or should I be aiming to sit on your right? In other words, limp in, let you raise it, and then repopulate. What's the strategy there? How do a tight guy like me, beat a loose guy like you?
You want to be on my left for sure.
Okay.
You want to decide after I decide for sure. You don't want to be, trying to figure out how to play me, because I may not, I'm scatterbrained, so I may not do what I do one time might not be the next time, and what I do tomorrow might not be the next day, because I don't even know myself. There's no method to the madness, but going by what you said, let's look at 2 different players. You got Dan Harrington, who plays as solid as you can play, and he won the world title. And then you got Stu Unger, who plays as aggressive as you can play, and he won 2 or 3. So they both can win. You understand? You can't say this guy's not a good player because he plays solid. Now, if you ask me which player I would take, I'll take the solid player every time.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, because their fluctuation in bankroll and probably fluctuation in their life is just so much better.
I guess the bottom line is there's many ways to win, but whatever your style is, stick to it and try to perfect it, right? Fix any leaks, keep studying, do all those things you need to do, because, your opponents are, especially nowadays, they're trying to beat you.
That's true, and the competition has never been better.
Robert Turner, bracelet winner 1993, final tabled in 1994. Really appreciate your time. I didn't even stick to the questions I had, so we're going to have you back on to get to those ones, okay?
Yeah, anytime. But everybody have a happy New Year and happy holidays.